Welcome to the Learner Experience Evolution, a podcast for corporate learning leaders, featuring interviews with change enthusiasts at AllenComm and in the larger corporate L&D community.
Well, welcome everybody. Once again, we're here. We're talking about innovation and change in our world, in the world of L&D, and I'm really happy to welcome Brian Kay. Brian Kay is with ADM, one of our longtime partners in creating some great training, and I'll let him introduce himself, and we're going to get going.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. So as you mentioned, Brian Kay. I work for ADM, or Archer Daniels Midland. I'm the Global Director of Technical Training and Education. Previously had significant activity in the environmental health and safety space. Prior to the last few years at ADM, I worked for almost 15 years at the Dow Chemical Company in a variety of different learning roles and continuous improvement roles and those types of things. I am a chemical engineer by background, but I will be honest and say that doing engineering type work is not really my forte. So I was fortunate enough to get into this space early on in my career and have loved it ever since.
That's great. Well, one of the things that fascinates us when we do this work is how we break through the day by day. You're coming from a manufacturing plant, food safety, a lot of things around that. Share with us, share with everybody a bit how you kind of took that approach of how you're going to make a difference, how you're going to innovate in a pretty conservative world from a process point of view, at least.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. I think for most people, they think of learning or even training from a specific one-time event as just something that needs to happen. They know that there's value there. They know that there's a need, but they don't really know what goes into it. They don't know how it's put on. It's just it's magic. Maybe that's the best way to say it.
Yeah. Kind of that black box.
Yeah, that black box. And so when needs are identified, opportunities are identified from a manufacturing environment or a production environment, it's a little bit on the, okay, we've identified the need, now let's just turn a switch and it's fixed type thing. But we all know, those that are in the L&D space, that's not how it works. And it really does take a lot of time and effort and resources and change management to create, develop, deploy training programs and training content. And I think that's the challenge in the two companies that I've worked with over the last almost 20 years. It's been a similar challenge, although both companies have been in different spaces in their, call it, learning journey or maturity. Still very similar challenges in terms of how do you make time for effective training, and how do you appropriately assess training to drive those metrics. So there's a lot of challenges there, but a lot of it is really just focusing in on value and what your end goal is and what you're really trying to achieve, and helping people to understand the process.
Sure. So within that milieu, and I know this is a question that a lot of our customers and peers have, is how do we drive innovation? How do you introduce new things into a world that's really set in their ways? I mean, yeah, they use new technology, but they're used to, those same stand-up meetings you have before a shift. They're used to the same posters they see. They're used to the idea that, an accident happened, now we have to talk about it. How do you cut through that noise from a design perspective, from a change management perspective?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that I've found success in, and I'll be honest, just like anybody else in L&D, we're always learning. right? We don't know everything, and there's always new challenges and new best practices to put in place. Um, I do think there's an element of recognizing and helping people recognize that what you've done in the past has gotten you this far, which is good, right? Hopefully it's good. But to move forward, you have to change and you have to do something different. And that doesn't mean necessarily throwing out, what do they say, the baby with the bathwater, right? In the past and making big changes. Sometimes small tweaks are sufficient. But you really have to get those champions. You really have to build those champions of your cause, right? Whether it's in learning, period, or for a specific topic, right? And I've always found that if you can address those naysayers or those big, opponents early on, they're probably your best champions long term. And if you can manage them, you can manage others. So I think it's a lot about just a selling aspect, right? Of really helping people understand what's in it for them. Why do we have to make this change? Why do we have to implement this program? Why do we have to build competency in this space and connect it to organizational goals, personal goals, those types of things. I think that's an important aspect that we don't always spend enough time.
Yeah. I think you're making a great point. I call it I would use two terms. One is clarity. We often, especially when we're conceived as being a compliance activity, there's really not clarity, like you said, what's in it for me, what's in it for the organization. And then people just go through the motions. Oh, I have to sit through this talking head. Oh, I have to sit through this program. And they tune out. I mean, they know how to click buttons. And again, we're talking about scale and training. One of our customers just brought up a really cool idea or a term that we use now in design is disequilibrium. You mentioned it. How do we say, yeah, we're going to show you again the history of accidents in different plants, but now it's different and I think a lot of that is how we get them to think, well, I can do something about it, or it needs to be thought of differently. And there again, how do we use mechanisms, synthetic design-based mechanisms, on a phone, on a computer, in a classroom at a plant? How do we create that disequilibrium so they are open or triggered to want to listen and then personalize,
Agree.
that training?
Maybe to that point, I think reactivity and a reactive approach, though it happens, right? Whether it's an incident that occurs and you have to do something about it, I think that doesn't do us any favors when we're in a reactive state, right? That's when I think a lot of people get into the mindset of something happened, now I have to go do this, right? It's another thing on top of everything. I have to take this training. I have to change my approach or behavior. But if we really try to take a proactive approach and understand the learning needs of our employees, our colleagues, and we survey them, we address their pain points, plan out strategy, those types of things, I think people are a lot more willing to come along that journey. I wouldn't say that they're just gung-ho, right, from the get-go, but they're more likely to come along and try the new things and participate and speak highly of it. And that's a big thing I'm really trying to drive, especially from an organization currently that I work for, that it is early on in their learning journey, in their learning environment.
Yeah. And that brings the term of credibility, right? How do we remain credible? But here again, as a person responsible for a training initiative, for in your case, even a very important safety initiative, it impacts people's lives. How do we make it real? And I think that one of the terms I think we should talk about more when we talk about innovation is making it real. Using techniques, in our training program that let people reflect, that let people communicate sometimes. We're so fortunate in 2024, 2025 to be in a world where most of our organizations, companies have LMSs, have LXPs, have so many different ways that we can cross from a self-paced activity to a live activity. How does ADM or how does your group think about that level of engagement? How do you engage learners in ways that you think will get better results?
Yeah, and I appreciate the call out to technology. I
Mhm.
love technology, and there's new innovations every day in that space,
Mhm.
to assist. But I think of all those as just tools in the toolkit.
Yeah.
Um, right, they're enablers for success, and um, I know at ADM, for better or worse, we aren't in the spot to really take full advantage of learning management system functionalities or a
Yeah.
consolidated system or new technologies, whether they're you jump into virtual reality or augmented
Yeah.
reality or anything like that. We're just not there as an organization. Not that we don't want to be one day, but we don't have some of the foundation level pieces. So that's where I think it gets to the point you mentioned before is really connecting it to something that's real. Um, this theoretical, you know, training and programs, they can only go so far,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the challenge that a lot of us have is, uh, you show information, you talk about information, they're a little hypothetical.
Yeah.
But if people don't have a direct connection to it, they've never experienced that before, they don't have a frame of reference, it falls flat. And I would say that's especially apparent in things like new employee onboarding programs. You're bringing people in potentially without good background, and you're
Mhm.
shoving all this information at them, and there's no way that they're going to retain it and understand it. And so the more you can connect it to real
Yeah.
things, and that sometimes means other engaging environments, maybe,
Yeah.
where you can go out in the field and do something, and put your hands on equipment and talk to people and see how things are done, and actually fill out the permit that you need to fill out, not just see it on some
Yeah.
slides. That's much more meaningful, and successful, and that's the journey that we're doing at ADM, is
Mhm.
is really transitioning into a place of more effective content and delivery,
Yeah.
not only from the material itself, but how we deliver it, how we facilitate it, how we
Yeah.
track it and manage it, and all the
Yeah.
pieces. So
No, you bring up an amazing point, which I'm going to just use my words because I want our listeners to hear that loud and clear. Connecting that advantage of scalable training, which is often self-paced, which is often done outside of the work environment, if it's an onboarding process, with kinetic activities, with real activities that will be done in the learning, in the workspace, and it's not just learning at work; it's integrating
yep.
best practices that you push out in your training, into the workplace. You mentioned an issue of technology, and I don't know if it's going to surprise you, but it definitely surprised me when we did this survey with our customers. Very few of them use more than, I would say, 20-30% of the capabilities of the technologies they have. They may use, for example, recording of sessions. They may use some gamification, but they're not using, learner feedback, which a lot of these systems are able to grasp. That's just one example. And I think if there is a way to drive innovation, of course, it's around learning design,
Yep.
like you mentioned, connecting it to the actual activities in the workplace. That's a learning
Yep.
design innovation. But there's also a way to innovate in your technology. It's not being afraid to challenge
Yep.
yourself, your vendor, or maybe your partner to say, "Hey, I have this great system our company just acquired. You tell me what I can use of it more, and
Mhm.
let's test it with some learners." So I think innovating in design, innovating technology.
Yep.
And I think that there's a third area of innovation, which I want to talk about for a second, and then we can move on to some other things, is how do you connect with the leadership you need to connect with those plant managers, in a way that helps you?
Yep. It gets a little bit back to the comment before of the what's in it for me.
Hmm.
Facility leaders, plant managers, even senior leadership understand the need for effective training and training solutions and learning programs. And I think everybody across all industries are seeing the loss of knowledge and expertise over time, and we're trying to catch up a little bit. So everybody recognizes it. Um, I think part of the sell is helping facility leaders, plant leaders understand the value of doing it, right? It's not just getting somebody up to speed quicker, speed to
Yeah,
competency, but we'll have improved things like retention rates,
yeah,
right? When people are set up for success,
yeah.
right? And that will propagate through a variety of other things and lead to improved, in our case, or in my case,
Hmm.
improved performance in environmental health and safety and total process safety.
Yeah,
So I think it's a lot of that. But that being said, it takes again a lot of resources to make it happen, and that's something that needs to be crystal clear early on. Is if
sure.
there's a need for support from a facility leader, a
Yeah,
plant manager, and their resources, their SMEs, whatever it is, let's ensure that we get that buy-in and support early
yeah.
on. Otherwise, you're going to just struggle on the back end.
Yeah, and again, it's what's good for us in our industry. It's so easy now to capture these people inexpensively, not just with video, but with full motion and stuff like that. Is pull them in to your
Yes.
program, make them part of its success by their participating in the program itself. I want to wrap up with one of my favorite
Sure.
parts of this conversation. You've been doing this for a while.
Yep.
I reflect that I've been doing this for way too long. I mean, I don't want to show people pictures of my hair when I started working in this industry. What would you tell yourself? What would you wish you would have known 10 years ago, 15 years ago,
Mm.
when it comes to impacting change and impacting people?
Yeah, I think hindsight's always 2020, right?
Yeah.
I think I would tell myself that change management is a much bigger part of this
Mhm.
than I would have thought. Um, and I think that part of that is organizations like I'm working in that are 100 plus years old, and even my past life at the Dow Chemical Company, 100 plus years old. You've got biases, you've got past experiences, you've got past, whatever it is that people are bringing in, and you have to move past that
Hmm.
in order to implement some of these changes. So just because there's new tools available doesn't mean that the organization actually has the appetite
Hmm.
um, and understanding. So I would really tell myself change management's even more important than you think. Things take time. Um, it's one thing to plug a hole with some content, and that's something that's more of a tactical approach. But longer term learning programs and knowledge transfer programs, it just takes time, and we need to build those champions early for the long term, right? Long term strategy. Um, and help to sell that. I think that's the key, and help educate others on the process and what it's going to take to be successful.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway, and I kind of want to leave our listeners and viewers with that note that, not everything happens just because you're told to make it happen. There's a process, there's a consideration, there's a look at the communication aspect of our field that's critical for our success. With that, Brian, I want to thank you a lot for joining us. I hope you and our listeners and viewers watch. We do a lot of these now as a way to get back to our community. So with that, I will sign off and thank you
Yeah,
from
I
AllenComm to
appreciate it.
ADM. Right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining the Learner Experience Evolution. All episodes will be posted on the AllenComm website, or you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Please reach out to info@allencom.com with any requests or questions.